touch up my makeup with me while I talk about grief. Okay, so my mommy died in November, and as anybody can imagine, that was one of the toughest passings that I ever had to deal with. That was one of my greatest friends. She taught me so much about life and how to be a wonderful woman, how to take care of myself. Um, she was just she was just everything, and her passing was so sudden. My mother was recently fighting breast cancer, and she went into remission, thankfully, but she was having not a whole bunch of complications bouncing back from that, but she took it like a G. She was just always so strong. She was always having trouble with her lungs. So this particular day, when she had to go to the doctor, they noticed that her oxygen levels were low, and so they had to admit her to make sure that her oxygen to get into her lungs would stable out. And as soon as that came back to normal, she was allowed to go back home. And then all of a sudden she had bleeding on the brain, so I think it was from a blood clot. Maybe the blood clot traveled to her brain and the hemorrhaging was too bad, so my father just decided to pull the plug to stop her suffering, because you could literally see her brain swelling up. So it was his decision to let her go. We kind of supported it because we just knew. I don't think we wanted to see our mother suffer any more than she already had to. So it was just her time. So now that happened in November. So it's been 4 months, almost 4 months, since my mother's passing. These are some of the lessons that grief has taught me so far, as I'm in the beginning stages of grieving my mother's death. Okay, so one of the lessons, maybe not lessons, but one of the things I never really heard anybody talking about when it came to grief is that no one tells you, like, you kind of in fear that other people will die. You don't know when, you don't know how, only because, and I guess maybe it's because of the way my mother passed. And she always had like health problems, so she was always kind of in and out of the hospital. And every time we had like these big scares with her, so I just assumed this was another day for her, another day where my mom is just having trouble with this and she's gonna come out. And when she didn't come out of this last hospital visit, it just made me realize, like, oh, I was kind of living in a bubble. Anybody could just not come home, especially the ones that you love the most, because me and my mother were so super close. I never thought that would be the last time I would ever see her face. So dealing with that, it makes you think, like, well, who else is on the list? Who else is on the roster? Fighting with her through cancer, and fighting with her through when she had aneurysms and all these sorts of surgeries. You just think, like, your mom's gonna pull through, especially because you've been through something so big with her before. You honestly just be like, okay, well, this will just be another day. And then you realize, like, dang, how much time do I really have with the people that I love? How much time am I wasting holding on to petty grievances or things that really just don't matter? The need to be right, all of that stuff. You just start to look at it like, well, I don't know when my brother's gonna die. Me and my brother is really close. And I remember when she passed, I was afraid my father was just gonna die. Like, he was just gonna end up on the road. Like, I was like, oh my God, my father's gonna die tomorrow. I just know it. I could feel it. I was terrified. Oh my God, my daughter. I was terrified. My daughter was gonna die. I was just so afraid of somebody else dying on me again, because it just happened so suddenly. So I'm like, oh my goodness, everyone's just gonna die tomorrow. I don't know what I'm gonna do if one of them does that. I'll be devastated. My heart will be infinitely more broken than it already is, and I don't have nothing and nobody. So those are some of the thoughts that I had, and no one ever really told me about that. So I figured I'd share that with someone, and maybe they can understand, like, oh, this is a normal part of grieving. I don't know, but I figured I would put that one in this video. Another thing that grief has shown me, and like I said, I don't know if anyone talked about it, but I'll just share my experience, is that you are super faced with their own morality. You start to see that you don't have much time here, and that all your fears that you think are valid, like one of the things I really, really wanted to do with my mother, she was always like super obsessed with Paris. Like I could go around the house and show you, like she used to have these Eiffel Tower paintings, and when my aunt went, she sent her these Eiffel Tower paintings, like the postcards. I would get her things with like French themes on them if I was shopping and I saw something. Loved a good French cake, and French loved bread and cheese, and she was a big bread and cheese girl. So things like that I would offer to her, and she would eat it up. And one of my dreams was to take both of my parents, my daughter, and hopefully my two brothers across Europe, because it's pretty easy to travel once you get across the pond. It's easy to travel across those countries, and I figured what would be better than to just take my family on a trip, make sure most of the expenses is paid, the big parts, and take them across Europe. And I never got to do that. I wanted her to experience that. I wanted all my family to experience what it was like to travel across the country, travel across Europe, and I never got to do that. And a lot of that was because I'd let myself down in certain areas of making enough income to give them that experience. There was a lot of risks I was too afraid to take, and it started to show up in my life. So one of the things that I started to see was, you don't have that much time on here, this earth, Ash. You're just gonna have to get over your fears so you can give yourself and the family the life that you envisioned for them. And there was no more holding back for that. So you start to realize, I don't have enough time. I don't have time to worry about any and everything. I don't have enough time to worry about how scared I am to take a risk anywhere, because it's not helping me at all, and I'm sick of it. So you will die. And memento mori is something that I say to myself pretty constantly now that she is not here with us anymore, on this plane anyway. But something that I keep in mind is my own morality now. I try to keep that in the forefront on every endeavor that I have. Every time I feel scared, every time I feel like, oh, I don't feel like doing it, I just tell myself, you literally cannot afford to overly think or overly indulge in your tiredness or how you feel. It's time to put up or shut up, because tomorrow you might die. So another thing that I heard people talk about, but I didn't know if it was going to affect me that much, but it actually is, the waves of grief that you will feel when someone just brings up their name. You're just lying in bed and you start thinking about, the moments that you shared. Like the other day, somebody was like, what would your mom be doing right now in the morning? And I'm like, I can remember detail for detail. I would just go downstairs and she would be laying in bed and probably playing Candy Crush on her tablet and on her phone, playing games. And I would creep up behind her and she would pop up with this big humongous smile on her face. And I realized I'm not gonna have that anymore. So it made me choke up. It's trying to make me choke up now, but it just made me realize, like, I'm never gonna get that experience with her anymore, in that context anyway. But those things do come and go. And you break down. It's uncontrollable. I'm pretty good at controlling my emotions, or whatever that means. I'm good at repressing them anyway. And you realize, like, oh, I can't control this. This has to come out. And trying to coax yourself into saying it's okay. You can feel this. This is one of those things where it's like, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, we try to talk ourselves. I'm a big one of talking myself out of how I feel. But this one was like, it's understandable. You just lost one of the biggest pieces in your life. It's okay to break down from this one. Because I would hate to have unchecked grief manifest somewhere, anywhere in my life. I know the effects of having unchecked emotions manifest in the body and blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, you don't never... It's 3 months in. I'm not expecting to get over it, but those waves of grief do come, and you have to deal with it, and just, accept it for what it is. Don't try to talk yourself out of it, and it helped me deal with the bigger emotions in my life sometimes that I don't want to deal with. So that is something that, not a daily struggle, but it does come out of nowhere, and you wish it hadn't, but it's there. And I would say that one of my final lessons that grief is teaching me so far is that fear is not an option anymore. I'm pretty sure my mom did not walk into that room thinking, oh, today's my last day. I'm never going to see my kids again in human flesh and in the physical body. I'm sure she didn't, which is kind of funny because I think maybe weeks before, my brother was like, she was like, apologizing for things that happened in the past. She was just making sure I was good, which was, kind of out of character. And maybe something in her knew that, this was her last days on this earth. So, I don't know. Maybe something, they knew something. But you start to see that fear isn't an option anymore, that you have to start living your life, not so much on your own terms. I was never a person that needed so much external validation to do the things that I wanted to do, but I was a person that was, some bigger decisions was always harder to make than others because I was afraid of how would I look, or was the logistics of taking my next step in my career or on my journey. How was things going to look on the outside? How was I going to be able to afford such and such? I had an opportunity to move into a house that wasn't in the best neighborhood. The house wasn't the greatest, but it was a pretty decent offer that was offered to me. Because it didn't look how I thought it was supposed to look, I turned it down. And I really think that severely held me back because I was just caught up in how was something supposed to look rather than, okay, this is the opportunity you've been asking for. How can you make the best of it and keep going and starting to transform your life into where it needs to go? So I say all that to say is just fear is not an option anymore. You start seeing like, dang, I'm pretty sure my mom never saw this coming. I owe it to myself. I owe it to my bloodline. I owe it to everybody around me to push past my fears and to go after the life that I envision for myself. Whatever this vision or whatever this wish is that was in my heart, that was given to me or that I was born with, I had no choice but to make it come true. And I get that my fear is probably trying to protect me from something, but it doesn't have to overly protect me from everything, and it doesn't know when to stop, really. So I started to see that, and I started to accept my place, that I just have to keep going. And I have to give myself the life that I wanted, give myself the content, the joy that I envision for myself. And I'll do what I need to do. I know that my mom is on the other side helping me through it. And yeah, in so many ways, I know her passing will help make me stronger. And she was all about strength. She was one of the strongest people I knew. So yeah, I would say that's another lesson that grief has unfortunately taught me. Grief is pretty hard. It's one of those things where you have no choice but to sit with it and face it head on, because it won't let you. Let me not say it won't let you. Grief is one of those things that just has you in a chokehold, and it feels so many different ways for so many different people. I know I was angry, my mother's passing, because I felt like this isn't fair. Why her? All the other bits and pieces of anger that I felt, the resentment that I felt towards her death, not necessarily her, but towards her death, And grief is still teaching me. Grief is still teaching me to how to navigate, how to own up to my own feelings, how to see life for what it is and not how I want it to be, to notice the fragility and the short time that we all have here together. And so many more lessons I'm sure grief will teach me, but I'm still in the beginning stages, so maybe I'll do a part 2. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.